The night was alive with glitter and noise. Flashbulbs popped outside a grand hotel, where limousines pulled up one after another, spilling out men in tuxedos and women in gowns that shimmered under the city lights. A charity gala was in full swing, the kind where fortunes were flaunted, reputations were made, and appearances mattered more than hearts. Inside, the ballroom sparkled like a jewel box. Chandeliers rained golden light across marble floors, violins played softly, and the air smelled of wealth. Laughter floated like champagne bubbles, loud, hollow, and practiced. And at the center of it all stood Veronica Hayes. A woman of staggering beauty and wealth, Veronica was the millionaire everyone envied. Dressed in a silver gown that seemed to drip diamonds, she moved like royalty. People whispered as she passed, "That's Veronica Hayes, the woman who turned her inheritance into an empire." She had everything: money, power, influence. But as her red lips curled into a flawless smile, no one saw the cracks. No one noticed how tightly she clutched her glass of wine, or how her laughter never quite reached her eyes. Behind the glitter, Veronica carried a loneliness so heavy it almost crushed her. By the third drink, her laugh grew louder, her steps less steady. Friends egged her on, but none truly cared. To them, she was entertainment. A spectacle. And when the gala finally ended, Veronica Hayes, millionaire, icon, untouchable queen, stumbled out into the night air, her silver heels clicking unevenly against the pavement. Cameras flashed. Whispers spread. The world was watching, but not one so-called friend offered to help. That was when he appeared. A man who didn't belong to this world of chandeliers and champagne. Daniel Carter. A single father, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Tonight, he was just a driver, wearing a second-hand suit that didn't quite fit. His hands were calloused, his eyes tired, but his presence was steady, like a rock in a storm. When Veronica collapsed against the limousine door, Daniel stepped forward instinctively, catching her before she fell. She looked at him through bleary eyes, her voice slurred but still sharp. "Don't touch me. Do you even know who I am?" Daniel didn't flinch. He held her upright, calm and respectful. "Yes, ma'am. I know who you are. But right now, you just need to get home safely." For a moment, she blinked, confused. She was used to men fawning over her, chasing her wealth, flattering her beauty. But this man's tone carried no flattery, no agenda. Just quiet firmness. She laughed bitterly, pushing at him weakly. "What are you, some kind of hero?" Daniel's eyes flicked to the flashing cameras nearby, then back to her. "No. Just a father. And if my daughter were in this state, I'd pray someone helped her too." Something in those words pierced through her drunken haze. For just a second, the ice queen of the gala looked vulnerable, small, even. He guided her gently into the car. The door shut. The cameras were left with nothing but questions. And as the limousine pulled away into the night, the world thought it was just another wealthy woman too drunk to stand, chauffeured home by a nameless driver. But what would happen the next morning, would shock everyone. Long before that glittering night at the gala, Daniel Carter's life was defined by struggle and love. Every morning began before dawn. The alarm clock's harsh ring echoed in a small, 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. The place was modest, cracked tiles in the kitchen, faded paint on the walls, but to Daniel and his daughter, it was home. The first sound wasn't his footsteps, but his daughter's laughter. "Daddy, wake up," little Emily would chirp, climbing onto his bed with boundless energy. Daniel would smile, even with tired eyes. Morning, sunshine. By 6 o'clock, he was in his work boots, tying Emily's shoelaces before walking her to school. He never drove her in fancy cars, just an old, dented sedan that coughed every time it started. But Emily didn't mind. To her, every ride with her dad was an adventure. While other fathers talked about promotions and vacations, Daniel was juggling 2 jobs. By day, he worked at a repair shop fixing engines. Cars, trucks, whatever came through the dusty garage. By night, he picked up shifts as a part-time driver, shuttling people who lived in a world far above his own. The paychecks barely stretched, but Daniel never let Emily feel the weight of their poverty. When she wanted a dollhouse she saw in a shop window, he built one from scrap wood, painting it with leftover colors from the repair shop. When she asked why they couldn't eat at restaurants like her classmates, he cooked spaghetti at home and called it Chef Carter Special. Emily's laughter was his fuel. Her smile was his wealth. But behind that smile, Daniel carried scars. His wife, Emily's mother, had passed away years earlier, leaving him to raise their daughter alone. Many nights he sat awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was enough. Could one man, with empty pockets and weary hands, give a little girl the life she deserved? He worked harder, pushed further, because failure wasn't an option. He had sworn over his wife's grave, "I'll protect her. Always." And so, Daniel became both father and mother. He attended every school play, even if he had to come straight from work covered in grease. He packed lunches with silly notes tucked inside. He held Emily close whenever storms rattled their old windows. To the world, Daniel was invisible. Just another mechanic. Just another driver. Just another single dad struggling to survive. But to Emily, he was everything. Her protector. Her hero. Her world. Little did Daniel know, the night he drove a drunk millionaire woman home, his quiet life was about to collide with a world of wealth, arrogance, and secrets. A collision that would change not just his destiny, but Emily's, forever. High above the restless city, in a penthouse that glowed like a crown of glass, Veronica Hayes ruled her empire. Her mornings began with headlines. Forbes. The Wall Street Journal. Vogue. All carried her face, elegant, flawless, unshakable. The woman who redefined wealth. Millionaire heiress turns empire into gold. To the world, she was not just successful, she was untouchable. Every step she took screamed power. At charity galas, people parted like waves before her. At board meetings, seasoned men twice her age bowed their heads, silenced by her words. She wore success like a gown, diamond necklaces, heels that clicked like commands, and a gaze sharp enough to cut through glass. But when the doors closed and the lights dimmed, Veronica Hayes was not a queen. She was a prisoner. Her penthouse, as vast as a palace, echoed with silence. No children's laughter. No warmth of a family meal. Just the hum of machines and the clink of ice in a glass of wine. Her friends? They weren't friends at all. They were leeches dressed in silk, feeding on her wealth, basking in her shine. They praised her in public but whispered in private, "She drinks too much. She's losing her edge. Money can't buy her happiness." They were right. Because no matter how many contracts she signed, how many headlines bore her name, Veronica carried an emptiness she could never fill. Once, long ago, she had dreamed of love. But her heart had been broken, used, traded like another business deal. Since then, she buried her tenderness beneath layers of steel. Her father had told her, "Never show weakness. Wealth is respect. Power is love." And so she built her mask. The millionaire woman. The ice queen. The one who drank too much but laughed louder. The one who commanded empires but went home to an empty bed. That night, at the charity gala, the mask was on full display. Her silver gown sparkled under chandeliers, cameras flashing like stars. She raised her glass, her laughter echoing across marble floors. Everyone watched, everyone admired. But inside, Veronica Hayes felt nothing. She drank to silence the hollowness, to drown the loneliness. Each sip was another layer of armor against the truth, that all her millions, all her jewels, all her power, could not buy her peace. By midnight, the cracks began to show. Her steps faltered. Her laughter slurred. The eyes of her so-called friends lit up, not with concern, but with amusement. To them, she was entertainment. The great Veronica Hayes, stumbling like any other woman. Whispers followed her as she left the ballroom. Did you see her? She's lost control. She's just another drunk with money. But they didn't know what waited outside. They didn't know that the mask was about to slip, and when it did, it wouldn't just change Veronica Hayes's life. It would change the life of a man she had never noticed. A man who was about to drive her home. And what happened after that, would shock everyone. The city was quieting down as the gala ended. The laughter had faded into drunken murmurs, and the marble floors echoed with the uneven click of Veronica Hayes's silver heels. She was still dazzling in her diamond gown, but her steps betrayed her. The mask of perfection she had worn all night was slipping. Outside, cameras waited like vultures. Photographers leaned forward, ready to capture the heiress at her lowest. Their whispers were cruel, their flashes merciless. To them, she was not a woman, but a headline. Millionaire heiress collapses after gala. Is Veronica Hayes losing control? Veronica stumbled, her vision spinning, her pride burning. She hated them all, hated their hungry eyes. She opened her mouth to tell them off, but her words tangled. Her hand slipped against the limousine door. She was falling. But someone caught her. Daniel Carter. His hands were rough, calloused from years of hard work, but steady as stone. He held her upright, his expression calm. Not pitying, not mocking, just firm. She tried to push him away, her voice slurred. Don't touch me. Do you even know who I am? Daniel's gaze didn't waver. Yes, ma'am. But right now, none of that matters. What matters is getting you home safely. His words were simple, but they disarmed her. Men usually grovel before her, begging for her attention or her money. This one? He didn't even look impressed. He was just, steady. The cameras flashed as he guided her into the back seat. He didn't linger for show. Didn't wave at the crowd. He simply closed the door and slid into the driver's seat, leaving the reporters with nothing but questions. The car ride was thick with silence. Veronica leaned against the leather seat, her mind foggy, her pride aching. She expected him to talk, to boast, to hint at wanting a reward. Instead, he drove in silence, his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. Finally, her irritation broke. You're awfully quiet. Most men can't wait to impress me. What's your game? Hoping for a big tip? Daniel shook his head slightly. His voice was calm, almost tired. No, ma'am. I don't need to impress you. I just need to get you home safe. She laughed bitterly, the sound sharp in the still car. Safe, you think I need protecting? His eyes flicked briefly to the mirror, meeting hers. Everybody does. Even millionaires. For a moment, her smirk faltered. As the city lights flickered past, she studied him more closely. His suit was worn but clean. His shoulders broad, his posture disciplined. His eyes, tired, but not broken. There was a weight in them, a quiet strength she didn't understand. You're a driver, then? She asked. Tonight, he replied simply. She raised an eyebrow. And the rest of the time? Daniel hesitated before answering. I'm a mechanic. Fix cars. Fix engines. Whatever keeps food on the table. Her lips curled in mockery. How noble. But then he added, voice steady, and I'm a father. That's the only title that matters to me. The arrogance in her faded for just a moment. Something in the way he said father, firm, rooted in love, struck her. She shifted uncomfortably, hiding her reaction behind another laugh. By the time they reached her penthouse, Veronica was half asleep. Daniel parked, got out, and gently helped her inside. The guard stared, uncertain, but let him pass. He carried her with surprising care, laying her on the velvet couch in her vast, empty living room. He looked around once. Marble floors. Gold fixtures. Cold silence. For all her millions, the place felt emptier than his small apartment. Daniel pulled a blanket over her shoulders. He didn't touch the jewels on the table, didn't glance at the safe in the corner. Instead, he grabbed a scrap of paper and wrote a simple note in his steady hand. Drink water. Rest. Tomorrow will be better. D. He left it on the coffee table, tucked the pen back in place, and walked out. The next morning, Veronica Hayes awoke with a pounding head and a blur of memories. She braced herself for scandal, headlines, shame, betrayal. But instead, she saw the blanket, the note, the untouched room. Her trembling hand picked up the slip of paper. Tomorrow will be better. She read it once. Twice. And then again. For the first time in years, Veronica Hayes felt something she hadn't known since childhood. Safe. And that realization, from a simple mechanic and single father, shocked her more than anything else. Veronica Hayes was not easily shaken. She had stood in boardrooms with billionaires, faced journalists who tried to break her, and fought off rivals who wanted to see her empire burn. But that morning, as she sat in her penthouse staring at a handwritten note from a man she barely knew, she felt something she had never felt before. Confusion. Who was this driver? This mechanic? This single father who had carried her home without demanding anything, without even leaving his name, just an initial, D. She turned the note over again and again, her lips pressing together. The words were so simple, yet they carried more weight than any flowery apology or scripted compliment she had received from the powerful men in her circles. Tomorrow will be better. She couldn't stop thinking about it. Couldn't stop thinking about him. The next day, curiosity pulled her out of her glass tower and into a world she had never stepped foot in. She found him at the small repair shop where he worked. The place smelled of oil and steel, cluttered with tools, engines, and old cars that most wealthy people would send to the scrapyard. And there he was, Daniel Carter. In his element. His sleeves rolled up, grease smeared across his arms, his brow damp with sweat. But there was something steady about him, something that made the chaos of the shop feel grounded. He didn't notice her at first. He was crouched by an old truck, his hands working carefully, his eyes sharp with focus. Beside him, a little girl sat cross-legged on the floor, holding a wrench far too big for her tiny hands. "Daddy, am I helping?" she asked with a grin that lit up the dim garage. Daniel chuckled, wiping his hands on a rag before ruffling her hair. "Of course, Emily. Couldn't do it without you." Veronica froze at the doorway, unseen for a moment. The sight stole her breath. She had never seen him smile before, not at the gala, not in the car. But here, with his daughter, his face softened, his entire being lit up. It was then she realized, he wasn't a driver who happened to be a father. He was a father who happened to be a driver. When Daniel finally noticed her standing there, surprise flickered in his eyes. "Miss Hayes." She adjusted her sunglasses, trying to look unaffected. "I was passing by." His daughter tilted her head, curious. "Daddy, who's that?" Daniel hesitated. "Just, someone from work." Veronica smiled faintly, kneeling down to Emily's level. "And what's your name?" "Emily," the little girl chirped. "I'm helping Daddy fix cars." Veronica's smile wavered. She had attended galas with children dressed in designer clothes, their smiles rehearsed for cameras. But this little girl's joy was raw, pure, real. The millionaire woman lingered longer than she intended. She watched as Daniel explained to Emily how an engine worked, breaking down something complex into words simple enough for a child. She saw how patient he was, how gentle, even after long hours of work. And something inside her cracked. She had money, influence, everything the world envied. Yet here, in this small garage, she saw a kind of wealth she had never known. Love. Later that afternoon, she invited them both to lunch. Daniel resisted at first. "I can't afford where you eat." But Veronica insisted. And when they sat together at a small diner, not the five-star restaurants she was used to, she found herself laughing for the first time in years. Not the sharp, rehearsed laugh of a socialite, but a real, unguarded laugh. Emily spilled a bit of soda on the table, and Daniel calmly cleaned it with a napkin, smiling at his daughter instead of scolding her. Veronica watched in awe. In her world, mistakes were punished, perfection demanded. But here, imperfection was met with patience. That night, back in her penthouse, Veronica couldn't stop replaying the day in her mind. The little girl's laughter. The mechanic's steady hands. The way she, a millionaire who thought she had everything, felt richer in that tiny diner than in all her years of opulence. And she realized the truth. Daniel Carter had given her something no one else ever had. Not money. Not power. Not admiration. He had given her honesty. And that truth would soon force her to make a choice, one that would shock everyone who thought they knew Veronica Hayes. Weeks passed, but Veronica Hayes could not forget Daniel Carter. Every time she looked at her reflection in the mirror, diamonds draped across her neck, her empire gleaming behind her, she remembered his simple words in that car, "I'm a father. That's the only title that matters to me." Her life had been filled with men chasing power, titles, money. But Daniel? He chased none of that. He only chased the laughter of his daughter. And that truth had shaken her world to its core. But not everyone welcomed this shift. The whispers began quickly. At parties, among investors, at charity events. "Have you heard? Veronica Hayes has been seen with a mechanic. A single father. What could she possibly see in him? She'll ruin her name. She'll ruin her empire." Her advisors urged her to stay away. Her so-called friends laughed, mocking the very idea. To them, Daniel was beneath her, grease-stained, poor, ordinary. But Veronica's heart no longer belonged to their world of masks. One evening, she arrived at Daniel's apartment unannounced. Emily opened the door, her face lighting up. "Miss Veronica," she squealed, running into her arms. Veronica hugged her tightly, feeling warmth she hadn't known in years. Daniel appeared in the doorway, surprise written across his face. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Why not?" she asked. "Because people like you don't belong in places like this," he replied, glancing at the cracked walls and worn furniture. Veronica met his eyes, her voice steady. "Maybe people like me have been living in the wrong place all along." For a moment, silence stretched between them. And then Emily tugged at their hands, pulling them both into the small kitchen. "Come eat with us." That night, Veronica sat at a chipped wooden table, eating spaghetti from mismatched plates. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she was home. But the storm wasn't over. A week later, during a high-profile charity gala, the whispers turned into open mockery. Veronica walked in, dazzling in a gown, but with Daniel and Emily at her side. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. "Is she serious?" one voice muttered. "She brought a mechanic here. This is suicide for her image." Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward. "Miss Hayes, is it true? Are you abandoning your high-profile circles for this man? What do you see in a single father with nothing to his name?" Veronica stood tall, her hand gripping Daniel's. The room fell silent as she raised her chin, her voice ringing with authority, but also with a softness no one had ever heard before. "I have spent my life surrounded by people who only cared about what I could give them. Contracts, money, power. But this man, she glanced at Daniel, her eyes shining. He has given me something no one else ever has. He gave me honesty. He gave me family. He gave me peace. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed wildly. Investors exchanged nervous looks. But Veronica didn't falter. You all call him a mechanic. I call him a protector. A father. A man with more strength and dignity than any of you could imagine. And if choosing him costs me my empire, she squeezed Daniel's hand tighter. Then it's a price I'll gladly pay. The room was stunned into silence. And in that silence, Daniel looked at her, the woman who had once mocked him, and saw not a millionaire, not an heiress, not the ice queen. He saw a woman who had finally found her truth. Months later, in a small garden blooming with white flowers, they stood together at an altar. Veronica wore no crown of diamonds this time. Her gown was simple, elegant, her smile radiant. Daniel stood beside her in a modest suit, Emily beaming between them, holding both their hands. The guests whispered again, but this time in awe. The untouchable millionaire woman had chosen love over wealth, family over pride. As vows were spoken, Veronica's voice trembled with emotion. I once believed wealth was power. But now I know the greatest wealth is love. Today, I marry not a mechanic, not a single father, but the man who taught me what it means to be truly alive. Daniel's eyes glistened as he replied. I once thought I was destined to struggle alone. But you gave me hope, you gave Emily a second mother, and you gave us a future. Today, I don't just marry a millionaire. I marry the woman who saw my worth when the world laughed at me. When they kissed, Emily clapped her hands and shouted with joy. The crowd erupted in applause. And for once, the cameras didn't capture a scandal. They captured redemption. Years later, when people asked Emily about her childhood, she never bragged about growing up with a millionaire mother or a hardworking father. She simply smiled and said, I grew up with love. And that's more valuable than all the money in the world. This was not just the story of a millionaire woman and a single dad. It was a story of masks removed, of pride humbled, of two broken souls finding wholeness in each other. It taught us that true strength is not in wealth, but in sacrifice. That the greatest riches are not measured in bank accounts, but in laughter around a dinner table. And that sometimes, the people the world mocks, are the ones destined to change it. So if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because here, we tell stories that remind us of one timeless truth. Love is the only empire that never falls.